back to my YouTube channel. Before I start, we will be doing The Child Was Shot Dead by Soldiers at Nyanga. Okay, please like, subscribe, and comment as well. Before we start, I need to give you some context about this poem. So Ingrid Jonker was an activist, right? In other words, Ingrid spoke against the oppressive system known as apartheid. A white lady, if I may add. But here's the problem. Her father was a proponent of apartheid. In other words, a supporter of the status quo. And Ingrid and her father didn't really have a very good relationship. And many people argue, as a result, Ingrid took her life. She drowned in Greenpoint, I think, many years ago. So she sadly took her life. I think she was about in the early 30s. This is not important, but I think, it's important for the context. They will not test you on background knowledge. They will never test you on background knowledge. But I think it is important. Okay, so the child was shot dead by soldiers at Nyanga. So what happened here is that a child was shot dead amidst a protest in Nyanga. So a mother took a son to the doctor. The mother and the child was not part of the protest. The mother took her child to the doctor, and a stray bullet sadly took his life. So there's this image where the mother is holding the child in her arms, and the poet is at the scene. Okay, Ingrid Jonker is at the scene, absolutely devastated as well. So the child was shot dead by soldiers at Nyanga. It is a political poem, and it is written in free verse. So as you can see, we do not have a rhyme scheme there. So it's written as a free verse. Whenever a poem is written as a free verse, it might emphasize liberation, freedom, or to be free. Okay, so do not think of structure in terms of structure. Think of structure in terms of how it can infer meaning. So it's written as a free verse. Could be to emphasize the idea of freedom, or to be liberated, or to be emancipated. Okay, so we have 3 stanzas, and then 4 stanzas technically with a coda in line 23. I will explain that now, a coda in line 23. Okay, so if you look at the poem, please have the poem in front of you. Absolutely important. You need to have a copy in front of you. I will give a detailed analysis. So if you look at the title, The Child Was Shot Dead, then you look at line 1, the child is not dead. So what we call, that is called a paradox. It's paradoxical because it is providing the opposite of the title. Okay, so the child is not dead. What they are saying here is that the child is medically and physically dead, but spiritually the child is alive, and the same child is going to influence other people to become defiant and to fight. So the child is dead medically, but spiritually alive. Okay, and the child is also symbolic of many other innocent lives that were taken during apartheid. The child is symbolic. In other words, the child is a metaphor of resistance and hope. Okay, so the child is not dead. That's a paradox. The child raises his fist against his mother. So the child, or in this context, the youth, raises his fist against the mother. In other words, a fist of frustration. The child, the youth, they are frustrated because the mother, they are passive in the fight for freedom. They are not fighting hard enough. They are not fighting to become liberated, and there's a sense of frustration there. So to raise your fist is to emphasize frustration because they are passive in the fight for freedom. Who screams Africa screams the smell of freedom. So the idea of scream, it emphasizes the idea of frustration, okay, and desperation as well. Who screams Africa? So the child and the youth, they are frustrated because many of the adults are passive in the fight for liberation and to be emancipated. Okay, heather's it's a scent of a flower. So the speaker is trying to convey it's a breathtaking scent, and the speaker is trying to convey that heather, and if you're free, you have this heather, this breathtakingly beautiful scent. Okay, in the locations, the heart and the siege. So the idea here is that the locations is making reference to those places that were segregated during apartheid, that were oppressed during apartheid. The heart and the siege. This is absolutely important because these people, it emphasizes brutality and cruelty. Okay, it emphasizes. Let me just get this line quickly. People who are oppressed or segregated as well, hard under siege. So remember that in the poem it is mentioned there, it is mention of different locations, and these people, they were oppressed within these locations, right? And they were oppressed and segregated as well. The child raises his fist against his father. Again, another sense of frustration. So not only against the mother, but also against the father, right? Indirectly accusing the father and the father's generation as being too passive and allowing the child to die. It is the child died as a result of being passive and not fighting. And it's a sense of frustration there to raise your fist. In the march, the idea of the march is to become, it's like a military. In the march of the generations, who screams Africa, screams the smell of justice and blood, emphasizing the idea of retribution. What is retribution? To take revenge, to fight, to become defiant, okay? In the streets of armed pride. In other words, fight for dignity. To have a sense of pride is to have a sense of dignity. So the idea here is that black people must not only fight to be liberated, but also fight for their dignity, armed pride. The child is not dead. So line 1 and line 11, there's a repetition there, and that is called anaphora or anaphora. And the repetition is emphasizing the age and the innocence of the child. The child only wanted to play in the sun. He only wanted to have a childhood, but he was unfortunately killed with a bullet in his head. The child is not dead, neither at Nyanga, nor at Nyanga, nor at Orlando, nor at Sharpeville, nor at the police station in Philippi, where he lies with a bullet in his head. So remember the line where I spoke about locations? These are the locations: Langa, Nyanga, Orlando, Sharpeville, and the police station in Philippi, where he lies with a bullet in his head. So now my question is, why did the poet not use a euphemism? A euphemism is when you're being subtle and gentle in your expression. So why did the poet say, where he lies with a bullet in his head, instead of where he died? And the answer is, it is to emphasize the extreme brutality and cruelness of the apartheid regime. It's also to emphasize the senselessness death of the young boy. But remember, this young man, he's not dead. He is alive spiritually, and is going to influence other people to become defiant, to fight the oppressive hegemonic system. The child is the shadow of the soldiers. This line 16, is an indicator that the child or the youth have the ability to become violent. So even though they are young, they have the ability to become violent, okay? On guards with guns and saracens and batons. So a saracen would be those massive armed trucks, right? And I've taught this poem many times, and I asked the learners, when you see that armed military truck, how do you feel? And they say, so we feel scared, we feel vulnerable. Now imagine this truck during apartheid. So it says here, on guard with guns, saracens and batons. It was an unfair fight. You had black people, vulnerable children, and then they had to fight the police. They had to fight the police. It's an unfair contest. The police, they are armed, fighting children with stones or batons, whatever it is. It's an unfair fight. The child is present at all meetings and legislation. The child is spiritually present. So when they are discussing where they are going to protest and how, they mention the child. Legislation would be the law. So whatever law is being implemented, the child is considered. The reason why they have new laws is because of the result of the child. He inspired people to become defiant. The child peeks through the windows and the houses in the hearts of mothers. So within a community, when the child passes on violently, the whole community will go into a stage of mourning. Okay, and this emphasizes the idea that my child is your child and your child is my child. So when they shot this child in the head with a bullet in his head, the community went into a stage of grief collectively. And the mothers, they sympathize with the mother. The mother sympathize with the mother of the deceased. The child who just wanted to play in the sun at Nyanga is everywhere. He wanted to play in the sun. In other words, he wanted a childhood. Is everywhere. The child is omnipotent. In other words, everywhere. Influencing people to fight and to become defiant. I always use this phrase. The child influenced people from Cape to Cairo. From Cape to Cairo. From Cape Town to Egypt. And that emphasizes Africa. The child who became a man treks through all of Africa. The child became a man. In other words, he took on responsibilities before his time. He became a man because of circumstance, because of oppression, because of segregation, because of racism, because of death. He became a man. He took on the responsibilities of a man before his time. He's influencing other people to fight, to become defiant, to become resilient, and to debunk and obliterate the oppressive system. A man before his time. He's taking on the responsibility of others. The child who became a giant travels through the whole world without a pass. The child is able to travel through the whole world. Remember, the whole world metaphorically, inspiring people to become defiant, to fight, and to debunk and obliterate the oppressive system. From Cape to Cairo, he is influencing Africa. The death occurred in Nyanga, but he is influencing Africa. Without a pause, line 23 is a coda. A coda is like a conclusion of a poem. It is only one line without a pause. In other words, during apartheid, remember, people were restricted by a dome pass. They were restricted. This child is able to travel without restriction and influence oppressed people to fight without the past. In other words, death liberated the child to be free in order to inspire you and I to become defiant, resilient, and to fight for freedom. Okay? If you like this poem, please like, subscribe, and comment. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.